So what was the purpose of today's stream? Today, what I wanted to do is I wanted to talk a little bit to setting up NAS servers and the difference between the different NAS servers that are out there. So to give you a little bit of background, the main server that I'm looking at today, so previously, oh, that didn't work. Previously, what I've been doing is I've been using Hyper-V as the main sort of, I guess I won't even call it NAS. I was just running Hyper-V on my main development machine, this beast here. And what I would do is I would just run up a couple of VMs, and over time I found myself running things like Active Directory and AD Connect and things like that. So I've got Office 365 connected to the Active Directory controller and all the rest of it. But as a lot of us have noticed over the last year or so in the UK, the cost of electricity is going up. So having a big heavy beast of a machine like this running 24/7 it's a bit wasteful, to be quite honest. So what I did is about a couple of months ago, I decided to build a new machine. And what I did is, I'll just show you here, I started by looking at some of the Fractal Design machines. Now I actually had an existing Fractal Design case, so I didn't need to get a new case, but I got a very plain, it's basically it's a case that's about 10 years old now, and I don't even think they still sell them. This is probably the closest to the one I got, which is a black one like this. It's a basic Fractal Design case, very simple, very basic case, but it's got lots of slots for hard drives and SSDs and stuff like that. I think it can take up to 8 drives. So there's literally 8 slots for these heavy duty hard drives. And the hard drives that I'm talking about are these ones here. If I can show you this. So what I have here is I've got a whole bunch of these 6 terabyte drives, and I've got a little adapter here, and I've got a bunch of these drives in different places. So what I do normally is I usually have a couple of these sitting together in a machine. This machine here can only take 3 drives, 3 large hard drives. So when I was actually expanding out the machine, I said, you know what, I don't need to keep this machine running all the time, but I would like to actually have a NAS server always on. So I have 2 6 terabyte drives in this machine here, which acts as my main kind of like redundant storage. I've got set up as RAID 1, is it? When you've got 2 mirrored, I think that's RAID 1, is it? RAID 1 or RAID 0. Let's find out actually. What's the difference between RAID 1 versus RAID 0? RAID 1, 0 with explanations. So RAID 0, block stripe, no mirror. RAID 1 is block mirrored, no stripe, no parity. Yeah. So RAID 1 is basically 2 identical drives with the same data on it. And that's what you want if you want the simplest setup. I won't go into why the disasters I've had with RAID 5 and just RAID 5 in the past. But that's something we can talk about another time if you're interested. What I found most useful is that the nice thing about having RAID 1 is that when you have a RAID set up and you lose a drive, all you need to do is pop the drive out and put another drive in, rebuild the drive, and you're up and running again. Or you can just split the RAID set and just convert this back into a normal drive and pop it into a different machine. So you've got a lot more recovery options when you actually have RAID 1. Now it's a bit more expensive because every drive you're spending twice as much money on. If you want 6 terabytes of RAID 1 storage, you need 12 terabytes. You need 2 disks, 6 terabytes in each. However, it does make your life a lot simpler, especially when you don't want to be doing full-time tech support for yourself. You want to minimize the overhead you have so you can get on with other things. So what we want to do is, I said, how do I actually reduce the cost of running this beast here? Because it's got a half decent graphics card, and it's got a half decent Elgato frame grabber as well for doing 4K frame capture. It's running several VMs, and really all I want to do is run a couple of lightweight VMs for do certain things. So I went off and I got one of these Fractal Design machines, and I got a new Intel Core, I think it's a 13th gen processor. I think it's the 400 series. Let's see what comes up here. It was something like i5 13400, something like that, I think is the actual processor. And what I liked about that is these processors are you've got much better thermal capacity, or TDP. So the thermal, what's it called? Thermal, I think it's called TDP. TPD. No. The thermal, I think it's, let's see if it comes up here. No. What was it called? The ability to, how much heat it actually generates when it's actually running. That's the GPU specification. So it's not actually that one, because if I remember rightly, the one I got was the F series. Is this the F series? So this one doesn't even have a graphics card. And the reason I want to do that is because without the graphics card, it's got a lower, it's using less energy as well, because it doesn't have to drive the graphics card. So just switch back over here. Stop confusing you with this scrolling madly on these machines. I suppose I could just go to the server and find out what is actually the spec of the server. So how do you get the spec of the server using Linux? Proc CPU info. So let's see what this says. Cat proc CPU info. Right, so we have it. It is a 13th gen so this is it here. I'll just scale it up a bit. 13th gen. This is the processor I got for the new RAID server. It's a 13th gen 13100F. Okay, and it's an i3. And the reason I got that is because the base power is only 58 watts. And typically, because I've benchmarked it, it uses about 35 watts typically when I'm using it. So it draws about 33 watts in idle, which is pretty awesome, because that means it takes about, costs less than 1 unit of electricity per day. So 10 hours would be 330 watts, 20 hours would be 660 watts. So it's about 2/3 of a unit of electricity. It's about 24p a day, something like that. Which is great. So I want to start with having a processor that was pretty low power, but it still has 8 threads, 8 virtual cores. It's got 4 cores. It's a hybrid threaded CPU, so which meant I was able to get a pretty basic motherboard, an i3 processor with 8 cores, 8 threads, whatever you want to call it, 4 cores, 8 threads, running at a pretty efficient energy efficiency, pretty low cost, and be able to use that to replace running this big machine here. Now, what that meant was I was able to set up a whole bunch of different servers on it and literally power this machine down when I'm not actually doing live streams and not doing trainings and stuff like that. Now, that was that made a huge difference for me, because for me personally, I love this machine here. I love this. I call this Raptor because it's a bit of a monster. But I actually don't use it a lot at the moment, because when I'm working in consultancy, I'm typically working on a laptop. I'm remoting into remote machines for clients, and I'm not actually using any of the power of this machine. So this machine is basically used for live streams like now, and I don't do a lot of live streams around technology, or recording trainings when I do trainings in the studio behind me. I'll show you that later on. When I'm doing personal development trainings, or I'm doing courses, recording courses about different programs I have. So what this means is that if you're looking at building a NAS server, if you're looking at doing something new around NAS server, you want to look at the efficiencies, the cost of running it versus the cost of, let's say, buying something off the shelf. Now, for me, I'm always customizing stuff. I always want to be able to customize and modify and change things. So I decided to look at TrueNAS first of all. So my first thinking was, well, I'll set up a file server. I'll put my RAID servers on it, stick a couple of 6 terabyte drives in there, have a look at the RAID servers, create some shared folders so I can just drop files onto it and use it on any machine in the home office. But the problem I ran into very quickly is I also wanted to run a couple of what would you call it? A couple of like container apps or small virtual machines as well, like Plex, for example, for sharing videos or programs or TV series that I've purchased previously, or DVDs that I've ripped myself, something like that. So in order to do that, I looked at the container features of TrueNAS, and specifically I was looking at TrueNAS Scale. Now, the problem I ran into is because TrueNAS is really designed as more of a NAS server for like file storage. That's really it. It's not really designed as a sort of a hypervisor solution. It can do hypervisors, but the problem I ran into two. The first one is the way they do the bridging and the way they do the networking on TrueNAS means if you set up 2 VMs, they can't ping the host, or the host can't ping VMs directly. So you can ping other machines on the network, but the way the NATing is done, the way the networking is done is not, it's not set up the way it works for me. Now, I'm sure there's a setting, I'm sure there's some way you can work around it and change some setting, but I just found that I kept hitting these blocks and said, okay, TrueNAS is not for me. So what I did instead, I said, okay, why don't we, instead of looking at TrueNAS, why don't we look at something else that would work instead? Now, mostly what I would use from a Windows perspective is a hypervisor or Hyper-V. And I didn't want to use Hyper-V because Windows is just a much heavier operating system to run from. And I found that if I'm using Windows, then everything just runs slower. So I want to keep the minimum overhead of the operating system. So it had to be a Linux base. So what I did is I came across something here called Proxmox, which I've never heard of before. And I want to share with you for a moment. Proxmox is really interesting. This is Proxmox running on my local network here. And when I set up, first of all, I said, oh man, this looks really confusing, because when you set up, first of all, it says create VM up here in the corner, but you have to actually set up some of the storage units first of all. It's not obvious how you do that. So if you're going to check out Proxmox and get it set, installed, all the rest of it, the first thing you need to do is make sure you understand between these three different views here. So what you have is you've got your server view, folder view, and pool view. And to simplify how that works, the easiest way of thinking about it is like this. The server view is about looking at the server, the host server, plus all of the other servers that you create, the virtual machines, which is basically, in this case, I've only one, and I've got all these different machines on here. I'll show you that in a second. These are all the virtual machines I have on it. But then you've also got the folder view, and the folder view basically allows you to look at the storage that you have set up on the folders of this VM. So when you start off, first of all, you're giving 2 different units of storage. You're giving a local storage, which is storing like file shares that you can use for things like uploading your ISO VMs, your images and stuff like that. And then the rest of it there is about setting up block storage devices, which is the raw block storage you use for creating the VMs themselves. So this one here is really for things like storing things like your ISO images. So the local storage for your ISO images, or if you're using container templates, whereas your local, this here, the VLM, is for block storage, as you're writing directly to blocks that become virtual hard drives for the actual VMs themselves. So effectively, I wasn't clear about this in the beginning. So what you need to do in the very beginning, before you set up any machines, you need to set up you need to get your storage set up and upload your different images that you want for your ISOs, and then you can actually create a VM. So when you go in here, then you can create a VM. You can choose the disks that you want. Let me see if I can actually walk through it here. Let's say we're doing a test server, and it gives us this ID for each one. We don't have to worry about that. So let's say I want to set up a TrueNAS on this, and we're going to use the defaults here. And then the disks, it asks you what disks do you want to use, and you can add in disks in here. Now, in this case here, it's assuming SCSI 0, and it's going to set up the storage on local LVM. Now, when you set up the computer, first of all, until you've got it set up, you might not actually have the local LVM set up, which means you can't actually use that. So I found this very, very confusing in the beginning, and I wasn't sure, well, how do you actually set up a VM in the first place? I'm going to cancel out of that. So anyways, once you get the basic system set up, it's much easier to navigate around. Now, what I did then is I want to say, well, once you've got TrueNAS up and running, what actually can you do with it? Well, the nice thing is you've got two different types of machines you can set up. You can set up the actual virtual machines themselves. So these are all virtual machines, or you can also set up containers. I haven't looked at containers yet. That's something I want to look at later on, because I might use the containers in this, but the real reason I want to set up this way with Proxmox first is because I actually want to set up TrueNAS as well. And what I have is I've got the TrueNAS scale set up on this machine, which I actually want to install. So I might actually just install it right now and see how it goes. Now, the interesting thing about this is once you've got Proxmox set up, it's much easier to set up TrueNAS scale, but TrueNAS scale didn't work as a very good VM for me at all. So let's just see if I can do some of this while we're here, and see if I can get some of the basic stuff set up. Now, TrueNAS needs a drive to install on. This is the basic virtual drive that was set up when I set up the virtual machine. So how do you go back? There you go. So that erases everything on this. Administrator. Switch back to my other screen because I don't particularly want to be typing while you're here. And set that up. So now it's going back and asking me about the next stage, which is, do I want to use EFI boot? Yes, for systems with newer components such as NVMe drives. I'm going to say no for now because I don't want the compilation. In fact, if I remember correctly, oh wow, can't resolve path to SDA3. I wonder, do I need to do a reboot and start all over? Let's see if I can reboot and start this again and get our TrueNAS set up. If I could get TrueNAS set up on the stream, I'd be very happy, to be quite honest. Now, it's booting. Is it going to boot off the ISO TrueNAS hard drive? I hope so, because if not, this is going to be a very short stream. This is not booting. Interesting. Okay, let's power it down. Hard stop. And let's start it again. See if it's booting from disk. Now it shouldn't be booting from disk at this stage. I wonder if the disk set is bootable, because we haven't set up the operating system yet. So let's do a hard stop on that and look at the boot order. I think what we need to do is we need to make that the first boot device. If we do it that way, then it should start fine. So now we go in here. That's more like it. TrueNAS scale. Is that the installation that we're booting from? I do hope so. Now, I actually this issue before with TrueNAS scale. When you've got a drive formatted with a valid signature and a valid partition on it, it may try to boot from that and fail. So I'm going to see if I can actually. This is acting up again. So there we go. So let's start again. Administrator, go back to my main camera for a moment. Passwords do not match. Let's try that again. Kind of difficult to do on stream. This is the third time getting the passwords wrong. I think I got that wrong again. Right. Let's go back here and see what's happening. We don't want EFI boot. Like I was saying earlier, when I'm looking at TrueNAS, I found that TrueNAS doesn't support. So some of the issues I had with TrueNAS, first of all, the issue I said, I couldn't ping other virtual machines on the same across. So one virtual machine couldn't ping the other one, or maybe they could ping each other, but one virtual machine couldn't actually ping the host because of the way the netting was set up, the network routing was set up. So I want to get around that. The other problem is that TrueNAS doesn't support TPM and secure boot, which means you can't install a Windows 11 or a Windows Server 2019 virtual machine as a TrueNAS guest operating system. And that's a problem for me because I use a mixture of Windows servers and Linux and everything else. So it just meant it was too restricted for me. And again, TrueNAS is not designed to be like a hypervisor. It's not specializing in hypervisors. It's really designed to be more of a NAS. Now my audio's just died. Actually, you can probably hear it, but I can't hear it. So I'm going to have to put some power on this. Hang on a second. So hopefully you can still hear me. This is one of the little problems I have with the setup I have at the moment, is some of the devices here actually run off battery. And if you ever watch Linus Tech Tips, one of the things he's talked about is that when he was doing a studio tour, what he did is he said, I am going to get rid of everything that is powered off batteries. And now I know why, because when you're doing live streams, the last thing that you want is devices dying while you're on stream and then having to do what I'm doing now, which is kind of muck around and try to sort stuff out while you're actually talking on stream. So now I can hear myself again. Great. So battery sorted out. So it said it's done. So let's reboot. But actually, we're going to shut down first because I need to change the boot order again because I don't want the fact I really want to. Let's just get rid of it. I think you don't get rid of it here. We'll disable it here. But I think you need to go into the hardware and get rid of the TrueNAS media. So I think we can double click on this. No, not there. We can edit this. Do not use any media. There you go. And I think now if we start it, it should start all by itself. And we get the full experience of TrueNAS straight out of the box. So one of the things I liked about TrueNAS is that TrueNAS does have this ability to talk directly to an Active Directory controller. So if you already have AD and Azure AD and you've got Office 365 and things like that, you can set up TrueNAS to use the AD controller for authentication, which means you don't have to set up a whole new set of users for everybody. You can actually use your existing LDAP server or your existing Active Directory server for booting up. And I think that is pretty important. Now, the thing is, I couldn't get that working when I was building TrueNAS directly on 10. So I'm hoping now this time when I set it up, I'll have a better luck in actually getting TrueNAS working with the system that I want. So now it says web user interface available at 27 port 80. So in theory, I shouldn't have to do anything else here. Let me just show you the screen. So that's it. Now it's up and running at this stage. TrueNAS is up and running. It says connect to this port 27. Now the thing is, I do want to change this because I don't want this to be running off DHCP. I want this to boot natively, and I want it to run off a static IP. So I just want to check first of all that I don't already have this IP address used, because I don't want it to be dynamic. Let's see if I can configure the network interface. Let's see if I can do this. Name, description, DHCP, yes. You know what? I think I'll leave it for now, because essentially this is kind of a long process. I can always change that later on. So what I think I'll do is quit this, and we are static routes. Let me see if we can turn on the static routes. Static route destination is gateway. Okay. Okay, so that's that done. So having that done, should now be able to get out of this screen here and just go directly to the IP address of that machine. So I'll do 192.168.1. I think it's 27. And there you go, TrueNAS is up and running. So I'm just going to log in here off screen, and I'm going to call it admin. I think is the default login. And we're logged in. So do you want to see what a TrueNAS server looks like when you log in? Sure you do. This is what it looks like. Okay. This is TrueNAS literally set up out of the box with nothing else in there. And yeah, it's up and running. So what do we need to do now is I want to see if we can go into credentials and get directory services working. So this is the issue I had before, and it's how to configure network services. So I'm not going to show this on screen, but I'll tell you how I'm getting on. So first thing we need to do is put in the domain name. So I'm going to put in the name of the domain, and I'm going to use my account. Oh, yeah, there's a third issue with TrueNAS that really annoyed me. That is, when I set up TrueNAS, it set the time to be Indian time, which is like 5 hours behind UTC, and we're close to UTC's British Standard Time, BTC. But I couldn't find where to change it. No matter what I did, BIOS or anywhere else, or using date-SS, it would always go back to India time. And then when I tried to synchronize, when I tried to set up Active Directory, it wouldn't work, because when you actually synchronize, when you set up AD or anything to do with like directory services, the time needs to be less than 6 minutes apart on the different servers. If it's more than that, then it's seen as it could be an attack or something like that. So it won't actually allow you to set up an account if they're more than 6 minutes apart. So if they're 5 hours apart, it won't sync. So one of the reasons I gave up on TrueNAS is because I couldn't, the clock kept getting reset to 5 hours different to my local time, and I have no idea how to do that. And without actually doing a different reset, is it actually changing? I need to get this back. Go back here. I'm using an Insta360 and it actually changes the this signal. See that? And go up, go up, go up, go up. You can actually zoom in. I need to go down. Anyways, I don't want it to do that, so I'm just going to press this to go back here to the main point. So we have my domain, my login name, and my password, and I need to put that in. And enable that and see if that actually syncs first time out of the box. So it's processing something. I'm waiting for it to do something. It hasn't closed anything, hasn't confirmed anything. Now, it did take a few seconds before it actually registered previously. So it hasn't failed as far as I can see. The save button is still disabled, like it's still thinking about something, but I don't see any processing. So if this works out of the box, that's fantastic. If it doesn't, that's a bit of a bummer, because I really don't have the patience to do any more on it tonight. So that said, where are we at overall? I am, yeah, I don't know if, no, that didn't save. So we're still back to the same place we were before. So Active Directory does not work. Hold on a second. Do I need to change networking? So where is there shell somewhere? Oh. So let's see what IP group says. Can I ping? Oh, we're not getting. Can't reach one of the servers outside the instant network. See if I can reach the servers inside this network. No. Now this is interesting. It says network is unreachable. I had this issue earlier on today as well, so what I'm going to do is, I don't think I can go any further unless I can get this sorted out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop out, and I'm going to have a little bit of a play this later on, and then I'm going to come back next week and have another chat about TrueNAS and Proxmox and see what I've discovered in the meantime and what I can update you on. So if you found that useful, guys, you know what to do. Do all the things that they talk about. I'm going to just check to see if it is still streaming on Twitter. Not sure, so sure it is. If you did watch this, let me know. That would be cool. That's where we have profile. Yeah, it's still streaming. I definitely need to get rid of the previous one. I'll leave it here. I'll leave it here. And we will come back and look at this again next week. There's Michael came in for a moment. How you doing, Michael? If you are here, say hello. If not, I will speak to you soon. Right, guys, that's all this evening. I had a bit of fun playing around with this stuff. I hope you did too. If you have any questions, you know what to do. And I will speak to you all very soon. Bye for now.